Somebody has a dog.
Nobody wants in. Oh. Hello.
Good morning.
Good
Good
morning.
morning. How are you?
Reva, you wearing my favorite color.
Oh, great.
Purple.
Are you in purple too, or is that navy blue?
No, that's navy blue. It didn't go with the pants that I had.
Ah.
But I love purple. Both my daughters are purple people. I don't know how that happened.
Uh-huh.
It's a family color.
Uh-huh, uh-huh. Yeah, I live in purple and blue.
Well, I have other colors too, but it's particularly gorgeous with your hair.
Thank you.
It does.
Uh,
It's very
oh,
nice.
well, thank you.
I'd always thought that someday I'd start a purple shop.
Uh-huh. Oh, that would be wonderful. I know a number of people who really love purple also.
Can you hear Sai?
Yes, my name
I don't-
is
Yeah.
Rebecca
Can you hear Sai?
Bolick. B boy.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think what hearing is, no.
I muted Ray.
Well, good morning.
It is a
Morning.
beautiful morning.
Oh, it's this kind of weather is
I
just
love
gorgeous.
I love it, love it, love it.
Oh, yeah, this is, I think, what we call fall. 70 to 80.
Yes.
I don't want it any colder.
Me either.
Either.
But
A
that
couple
will,
of days,
we don't have any choices, do we?
I know that, but I can wish.
Wishing is good, yes, of course.
I don't like winter.
No,
Don't either.
especially in the Midwest. Oh, my gosh.
That's
Ooh.
where I was last from, Ohio.
I'm from Kansas City, so yes. We get,
But
we
yeah,
got more ice than we did snow, though.
well, I remember an ice storm in Ohio where people were breaking legs,
Oh, yes.
like 5 inches of ice. That's when I decided to get out of Dodge and move west. Enough is enough.
Yep, God sends us little signs.
Yeah, it was a sign. And I was brought up in New York and it was damp and I used to hurt. So I like Arizona. In fact, I love it here. I wouldn't think of moving any other place.
No, me either.
My children hate it. They won't come. I
Really?
don't expect them in the summer. I have a daughter in California and one in the Czech Republic.
Good morning, can you hear me?
Yes,
Yep.
we're
Yeah.
good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
We're all excited because this afternoon is the Golda Meir Marathon.
Ah,
I hope everyone's read 6 or 7 books on her. And we're ready to.
We're ready to rumble.
It was a great choice.
She ran away from her parents at age 16. Didn't like Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
Didn't think too much of the husband either, I don't think.
No. Went to Denver, Colorado. This is before Bernie was there.
So you can't blame me.
a few years before.
We can't blame you. Does everybody know who's new here? We've got
Quick look.
a couple of new people. Do you want to introduce yourselves?
Okay.
Or Steve, do you want to help introduce them?
Hi, Dee. Go ahead and start if you'd like.
Ooh, me?
Dee.
Oh, okay.
E.
Oh, here.
Hi. Tell us a
Dee.
little bit about yourself.
But we can't see your face. Can you get a little higher?
Tilt your computer down.
Your camera or your computer down.
Okay.
Well, tell us a little bit about yourself, Dee.
Muted.
Okay. We're not hearing her. Okay.
She's not muted.
No, she's not muted. I don't know what the deal is.
Can you? Oh, now she's muted.
No, she's muted.
Go
Dee,
back the other way, Dee.
Unmute.
This is what our children are so good at.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't think she understands what you want her to do.
I agree. But I think Bonnie is fairly new. I'm not new to the congregation, but new to Torah study. Go ahead, Bonnie. Tell us about yourself.
I don't know much what to say, except I'm very interested in all of the discussion. And I love and appreciate and respect all the opinions and thoughts that people have given in the classes that I have attended. So thank you.
How long have you been a temple member, and where are you from originally?
Oh dear, do you really want to know where I'm from? I'm from Arkansas.
I won't hold that against you.
But we moved from Arkansas to California when I was a little tiny girl. So I don't have a lot of memories.
The California pretty much. Yeah.
Pardon?
California pretty much then.
Yeah, I grew up in California in all different areas until I moved to Arizona.
Okay.
And I've been a member of Temple Beth Shalom since 2016.
Okay. Very good. Very good.
And Bonnie is our greeter,
Yes.
but she's going away a few weeks. So if anyone would like to substitute for her and, greet everyone and work with Tandler, standing outside now that the weather is not so warm, you just let Bonnie know, or let me know, or let Denny know, and you can stand outside and greet everyone, which would be very nice. Bonnie does a wonderful job at it. And Bonnie, you're also working with Denny to figure out a week that we can, introduce Tandler to the congregation, right?
No, that had been mentioned to me, gosh, at least almost 2 months ago, I'm going to say. And then I didn't hear anything else about it. So I wasn't sure what was going to happen as far as Tandler being introduced. I'd love to be there when he is, though, because I have so many nice things to say about him.
Yeah, so let's see if you can push powers that be to actually get that done. Okay, who else like to introduce themselves who are relatively new or if not so new, if you just want to introduce yourself? Who's next?
Well, I will go next. I'm Shirley, and I would love to be your greeter, except it's a little bit too far for me to go. I live in Mobile, Alabama, so that's several hours away, and I can't walk that far. I'm originally from Michigan, and I moved to get rid of the cold weather. I moved to the Cayman Islands in 1980, and then I moved to Florida in 1989, and then I moved to Mobile in 1990. And that's where I've been since.
We're glad you're here.
Thanks.
Thanks, Shirley.
Yep.
Who's next?
The rest of us are old timers, except
Yeah.
maybe it says Bannock. What is your first name?
Benita.
Benita. We've been here before, though.
Yes,
This is my third time.
right.
So tell us a little bit about yourself, Benita.
Well, I'm originally from Chicago. I've been here 28 years. And other than that, fortunately, 2 of our children live here. Our daughters, we each have 2 daughters. So we do get to see the grandkids, which is wonderful. And the others live in Milwaukee.
Ah,
Yeah.
where Golda Meir was from.
Yes.
There you go.
And I have never met Jennifer, even though she has been here with our group. So can we learn a little more?
Hi. Hold on.
Hi.
Yeah, my name's Jennifer Martin. I've been a member of the community, oh my gosh, for about 5 years now, I think. And I'm a retired registered nurse and have lived in Surprise for about 5 years.
Hi, Jen.
Hi,
Welcome.
thank you.
You're welcome.
And Dee, can you hear? Thank you, Jennifer. Dee, can you hear us? Shake your head up and down if you can hear us. Can you push your camera down a little bit so we can see?
How do I push the camera down?
Tilt the computer.
There you
A
go.
little bit more.
Okay.
A little more.
See your mouth.
There you go. Almost there.
Okay, and Dee, do you want to say hello?
Hello.
There you go.
There you are.
Let's see.
Dee,
And
welcome. You're our newest member.
Hello, everybody.
hi, Miriam.
Hi, Mary.
I want to tell you I became a great grandmother yesterday again.
Oh,
Congratulations. Mazel tov.
Mazel
Thank
tov.
you. I'm so excited. It's incredible because that one is here. That one I will see.
oh, wow.
How many is that now?
Yeah.
How many great grandchildren?
Another future doctor.
7.
7?
Wow.
Yes.
Wow.
That's wonderful.
Yeah. And I didn't tell you about the one. I'll take 1 minute to tell because I don't want to take up time. One was a surrogate, and she was having, it's their egg and their sperm, but she didn't want to get vaccinated, and she lived in Missouri, and she got COVID very badly. She was on her deathbed, and one of the twins died. They were 7 months.
Oh, wow.
And she got this terrible COVID, and one of the twins died. So one of the twins now is 4 pounds, 8 ounces, was born at 3 pounds, 8 ounces, and they say is fine, knock on wood.
Oh,
Lucky one.
Awesome.
Amazing, amazing.
yes.
Ray. Miriam, mazel tov.
Thank you.
And this, as you can imagine, was a source of great trepidation for Miriam. So must be tremendously relieved that it's
They're both here, yeah. That one is there and one is in Chicago and one is here.
Marion, I want to tell you, my brother weighed 3 pounds, 3.5 pounds at birth.
Oh,
He gained
really?
weight and lived for 84 years. I weighed between 2 and 2.5 pounds.
Wow.
They saved me in a new contraption called incubator, and I was on exhibit at Coney Island. And 13 years later at the World's Fair, I met Dr. Cooney, who was really a Cohen, and thanked him personally for bringing incubators to America in time to save me, because my mother.
Oh, wow.
And here I am.
Yeah. Well,
And are you ever?
Very
Can
good.
you-
It's an
can you
incredible
even
story.
think of the
Wow.
Can you even think of a 2-pound bag of sugar, for example, and a baby 2 pounds? It's
Wow.
incredible.
I could sit in my father's palm. I
Oh,
lay
my.
in it. I lay in it.
Wow, that makes me feel better. Mine
Oh,
was.
I gotta find my
That's
blessing.
why I told it.
Okay, Steve,
Wait 1 minute, Rabbi, and our Roz became a grandma about a month ago, I think, to a real little one too.
Yeah,
preemie.
that's right.
Let us go ahead and begin with the blessing before Torah study, and then also to remind you to mute yourselves if you're not wanting to raise a question or make a comment. Baruch atah Adonai.
Adonai.
Asher k'nishmatim mitzvotav, v'tzivot divrei Torah. Blessed are you, Adonai our God, ruler of the world, who has sanctified us with his commandments, commanded us to obey the words of Torah. Amen.
Amen.
Rabbi, it's all yours, my friend.
okay. Thank you, Steve, very much. And good morning, everyone, and Mazel Tov to Miriam and everybody else who's have a simcha recently. We're talking today about Perek Bet on page 48. Should good people suffer for the evil that bad people do? Hopefully, again, everybody's getting these PDFs sent to you. If not, let me know afterwards or at any time, and we'll do an investigation to see why you're not getting it. So basically, this is another permutation of the very basic question that religion asks is, why is there evil in the world? You know, why is there so much evil in the world? And in this particular case, we're concerned with the question of, you know, how do good people suffer because of bad people? And we're connecting this, of course, to the book of Genesis. We're in Parshat Vayera, which is the 4th parsha of the book. And we're still dealing with the stories of Abraham and Sarah. Are there any opening questions or comments? Minya, good morning, Minya.
I have a question about something that I read on page 45, which was before the discussion for today. Underneath number 3, it says, one evening, 2 men angels arrived in Sodom. Lot, who was sitting at the gate of the city, welcomes them and invites them to stay the night at his house. The wicked people of Sodom gather outside Lot's door, demanding that he turn over the visitors so they may sexually abuse them. Did I read that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Good question.
What it
Yeah.
said.
I mean, this, I didn't write these stories.
I know that.
But yeah, this is, you know, yeah. And it goes on, it gets worse.
Yes, it does.
So anyway, there's these two guys that are visitors that are in Lot's house, and this gang want to gang rape them. But then what does Lot do instead? Because he has to protect his guest, he turns over his
Daughters.
Yes, so
Daughter.
I mean,
Daughter.
not that I'm against hospitality to strangers, but it seems, you know, that, you know, to substitute your daughters for people that you don't know is
Right.
it's a rather bizarre decision. So there's a lot here to yeah, well, okay, Minya. You opened it up. It's the sort of thing that rabbis try to slip by and not have to comment on, but you
No.
gotta get up very early in the morning to.
I did.
Steve, next year, make sure we don't send that page out as part of the readings. Okay, comments on what Minya's raised. Bernie and then Miriam.
Is this a possible reason why somewhere later on in the tale, his daughters seduce him for revenge?
Can't believe we're going down this road.
Rape and incest and you know, yeah, so I don't even know how to answer these questions. but yeah, I mean, the daughters, you know, there's the story that they think that the father's the only male left in the world, and if they're going to continue to procreate, that he's the only person they can have children with. That's what they say. So they get him drunk, and it's a little bit reminiscent of the story in Noah that we're doing in the course, where, you know, something sort of similar happens after the flood. So Bernie's question, I mean, is there a connection? It would appear to be, but what that connection is, I'm not sure. We'll try to come back to this. I'm not trying to evade the question, but I'm evading the question. Miriam.
Another thing that always bugs me is why a loving God would ask Abraham to murder his son.
All right, that's a completely different part.
Yeah, I said, but that's another, no, it's mentioned.
It's in here too. She's right.
It's mentioned in there.
It is.
And every time I see that story, it bothers me because everything says thou shalt not murder, but this is murder if he kills his son, even though.
Well, it's a sacrifice, you know, which might be different than murder, but in some ways it's worse, because if you go into Miriam, if you go into Fry's with a gun and you want to rob them and you kill a teller, you know, we know what that is. That's a murder committed in the process of robbery. It's a bad thing. But here, God is asking you to kill your son.
Why would a loving God ask?
Right, that's, you know, the first case is clearly just a criminal activity that led to a murder. I mean, it's bad, and bad. But here, God is asking you to kill your son. It would be, it's just inexplicable. The other is a crime. It's a crime. You know, you don't rob grocery stores, but gunpoint. And if you kill somebody in the process of doing that, everybody knows you're doing something that you should not have done, that God didn't want you to do. It's clear. the case Miriam brings up is just of the sacrifice where God wants you to kill, he tells you to kill your son. That's just completely inexplicable. Back to Bernie and then Cy and then Shirley and then Ray.
Could we not assume that in this case, God never had the intention of letting it go to completion?
In this case here with Sodom, well,
No, with Abraham and Isaac, the sacrifice of Isaac.
well, you could.
I would assume that if you carry this a little further down the road, God never intended Abraham to sacrifice Isaac.
Right.
Yeah,
But Abraham
on the
didn't
other
know that.
hand, in addition to that, wasn't child sacrifice at that time a relatively common thing?
well, that doesn't make it good.
No.
Well, that's a question. I actually tried to investigate that. I bought a couple books on child sacrifice in the ancient Near East. It was really hard to figure out how common it was. The data is so fragmentary. I mean, there's a few references here and there. It's really, really hard to know. Did it, it's not even, there's no proof it really occurred in that area at all. There's no proof of it. It may have occurred a little bit. It may not have occurred at all. It may have occurred fairly often. I wasn't able to find anything that, scholars don't know because there's just no proof. You can take one text and then just jump to conclusions, but there's really no evidence. In Peru and places like that, they found, larger numbers of children that were sacrificed. But in the ancient Near East, there's not that sort of proof. But the whole Gehenna, which is a Hebrew word for what we might translate as hell, was a valley near Jerusalem where a certain other tribe supposedly sacrificed children, and that was where why Gehenna, which was just the name of a valley originally, was associated later with hell. But to what degree that's based on actual, child sacrifice, or rather than just, if you want to slander another group, you could say the Canadians kill their children, and that doesn't mean the Canadians really do kill their children. Okay, Cy, Shirley, and Ray.
I want to take the position that at that particular point in time, the one God was not necessarily a big thing. There was still belief in a great many gods. The writers and some of the people around them believed in this one God concept. And in order to convince the other people that there was only this one God, these writings made God the hero, that he could do things that nobody else could do. And so if people thought things were bad, such as the rape of what's his name, Lot's daughter, God could correct it. There's no other person that could do it but God, to try to convince the people that the one God was the powerful God, not all the other gods that they were thinking of on an ongoing basis.
Okay. All right, Shirley.
I don't think he ever intended for him to kill his son. I think he was testing him to see if he would follow his directions and do what he told him to do, and stopped him just before he sacrificed him, which God knew he was going to do. So he really didn't. I don't think he intended for him to kill him at all. I think it was a test.
And Shirley's giving the standard rabbinic explanation, so that may not be a parallel case to the Lot story that we're seeing here. But, all right, who is next? Ray.
At a previous set of Torah classes, and I remembered it because it's stuck in my head, because this is something I bet every mother who reads this objects to it. But it's my understanding that Baal, who was the big god, was represented by an idol which had a huge mouth, fiery. The priests built up a good fire, and his people were expected to throw their firstborns into that baby as a sacrifice to a Baal. This was going on around 600, 700 among the idol lovers. Baal was the big shot. I think this story is very much against killing anybody, but especially young children. I also read many years ago about the Aztecs killing young people. So it did happen among the idol lovers. And I think that's why this particular story exists. I also believe that these are allegories and that they didn't really happen.
If you've all heard of Mel Gibson, you know, the most famous anti-Semite in Hollywood. But his book, his movie Apocalypto is really one of the best films in the last couple of decades. And it shows these warriors, I guess, in Peru or somewhere who are taken captive and taken off to be sacrificed. And it shows how whichever culture it was, was desperate and felt that by sacrificing warriors to the rain god or whatever god it was, that they could alleviate the evil decree. And so this is hard for us to imagine today because, we have a more scientific worldview. Today in America, every American understands the scientific method and rationality and logic and how to reason.
You're being sarcastic.
But we should, and therefore we should understand that that sacrificing children or warriors or any type of people and just killing them because God is supposedly wants that, you're going to need a lot more evidence that that's actually what God wants before you should, go about doing anything like that. Okay, so let us turn to the essay for this week. If there's no more further questions at this moment or comments, we'll see what we come across. We're looking at the question of justice, in Sodom and Gomorrah. So it directly relates to Minya's point about what was going on in Sodom and Gomorrah. So I think we can all agree that having these gangs form outside people's houses and demand that guests be turned over for gang rape and maybe murder is not something that you can tolerate. And presumably they were doing all sorts of other crimes as well. So this was a pretty nasty group. And now why they were nasty and how they got nasty and how they compared to other people in the region is something we'll have to talk about. Okay, Perek Bet, should good people suffer for the evil that bad people do? Who are the bad people? Don't all answer at once.
Sodomites.
Sodom and Gomorrah people.
Right, the people in Sodom and Gomorrah, most people, and who are the good people?
Lot's family.
Okay, there's always a few good people sprinkled in with the bad people.
What page are we doing, Rabbi?
Page 48 on.
Thank you.
At the bottom right-hand corner, Perek Bet, should good people suffer for the evil that bad people do? Okay, who would like to read?
I'll read.
Okay, Pam, just to ask Dee, are you following okay? You got the sheets and everything?
Yes,
Yes, okay, good.
I'm here.
Okay. Okay, Pam, go ahead.
Should good people suffer for evil that bad people do? The Torah informs us that when God told Abraham that Sodom and Gomorrah were to be destroyed because of the terrible sins of their citizens, Abraham boldly asked, will you sweep away the innocent along with the guilty? What if there should be 50 innocent within the city? Will you then wipe out the place and not forgive for the sake of the innocent 50 who are in it? Far be it from you. You should not judge all the earth, deal justly.
Okay, stop. So this is not that dissimilar from the Noah story where God brings a flood to drown everybody except for Noah's family. Now, one would presume that among the tens of thousands of people around, there were some people that weren't so bad, but God drowns everybody except for Noah's family. So I don't know that God has a record of being all that discerning, right? And there is the concept of collective guilt, right? So if you're living in a society that's generally bad, you're guilty as part of the society. Is that not true? So why should God worry if there's, I don't know, Sodom and Gomorrah had a population, let's say 50,000 people, and Abraham is quibbling over 50 good people. But if most of them are going around within these gangs, demanding to gang rape innocent visitors and murder people and rob people and do all sorts of terrible things, then what does it matter if there's a few people that are not doing that sort of thing? You know, they should have gotten out of Dodge when they could. Comments, Lorraine or B or Ray.
Well, today's paper is talking about 19 missionaries and their families being kidnapped. And this is in Haiti, which isn't exactly a paradise right now. And they're asking $1 million for each of the 19 people.
That's right. I saw that.
This is a good parallel. What do you think God should do? Get rid of all Haiti?
Far be it for me to advocate any policy to God. I don't even want to tell the temple board what they should do. But I certainly don't want to tell God.
I withdraw the question, Rabbi.
in Haiti. However, I was in Haiti as a child with my parents on a cruise, and we spent a delightful day, you know, traveling around, and I bought this very colorful shirt in one of the clothing stores for tourists, and you could see there were these mansions on the hills. The hills sort of circled Port-au-Prince. There was the dictator then Duvalier, who's long gone. But these mansions, there was like 30 or 50 or 100 mansions on the hills. And then under in the city bowl, there was thousands or tens of thousands of these, you know, shacks, you know, where 99% of everybody lived. And then when I was doing my training to be an interim rabbi before I went to Alabama, where I was supposed to stay just 1 year and help them transition, I did my interim rabbi training with interim ministry networks. It was not a Jewish group, but it was a group that trained all different types of people to be interim ministers. And it was 3 parts, and I did most of it in Jacksonville, Florida, just because I thought that would be a nice place to spend a little time. And one of the fellow students was a missionary in Haiti. And so she and her husband invited me to visit them. And I was thinking of actually doing it, and then they said their water had been cut off, and they were I think we were in the process of deciding when I might come, and then the water's being cut off, and they were going to be leaving the country as soon as they could. And when I got that email, I thought maybe I shouldn't go. But you know, when you have breakdown of law and order, then bad people come out of the woodwork, and they'll do things like kidnap and kill, and it just becomes a nightmare. Marcia and then Cy.
A terrible thing to say, but Haiti has been, if you will, plagued with disease and earthquakes and hurricanes and anything that natural disasters could be thrown against them. It's been quite the time. I know a couple of the presidents were down there. Was it Clinton and Bush or something, trying to help people out several years ago because of so much that was going on and the terrible things that were happening? I think maybe God is punishing them, if you will. You know, I mean, it's just a terrible thing, and the dictators that they have endured that have been so bad to the people. You know, but what's going on now, immediately now, is terrible. But they've had their plagues.
Unbelievable.
When I was there in 1952 on the way to Panama, I was having trouble. So they've always had trouble.
Yeah.
But what I cannot see is that why a good person should be punished. I can't understand God letting that happen. The good person is doing good things and may do better things later on. I just can't understand why that should happen.
Well, it's a lot easier, Miriam. If I was God and I saw those people kidnapping those people in Haiti, I would just say, let's bring a earthquake to Haiti and teach those people something. So I don't
But
have
that's
to,
what I can't understand.
that you would think God would say, I'm gonna harm those kidnappers, but I'm
Right.
not gonna harm the
Anybody else.
lady who's just trying to earn a living for her 4 children and works in a supermarket or something, who lives down the street. And she
Right.
didn't kidnap anybody. She didn't murder anybody. She gives charity and goes to church. But if you were God and you're busy, you don't have time. You just say, let me just punish the people in that area. Cy and then Ray.
I really don't understand why any of us are surprised. The fact that it happened in Haiti is only because of the nature of Haiti. But think back a few months when all those young girls were kidnapped in Niger, in Africa, hundreds and hundreds of them, and their families paid ransom to get them back. That happened 6 or 8 times in that country. And there's nothing unusual anymore. It's a normal thing. And God didn't step in then, and God is not going to step in now. They're going to have to produce the money if they want their families.
Well, and I don't want to frighten people, but you know, you can already see over the events of the last couple of years in the United States that it wouldn't take that much to descend into chaos here. And you know, if all it takes is a series of 3 or 4 different things to happen one after the other, and then there's plenty of not nice people in the United States who would then come out of the woodwork, and they can do whatever they want. You know, once the military and the police are not there, then you'll see the same thing in, you know, now I hasten to point out that Haiti, you know, this is a few months after a group we're not exactly sure what happened. They assassinated the president, you remember, just very recently. And so this is following that, and that it's interesting that the news articles have not drawn a direct parallel. and there was a series of Colombian military experts that claimed that they were hired to arrest the president for drug dealing. And then when they showed up, they claimed the president was already dead and they were blamed. So which is certainly possible that somebody, framed them. And it's also possible that they were the ones that executed the president. So this is coming up. It's no coincidence that first you have political upheaval, and then you have innocents being taken captive. And this is similar to Sodom and Gomorrah, right? You might argue that these gang, if they'd taken those two men, that if there'd been a suitable ransom paid promptly, that they might have been returned unharmed. Maybe, so money is sometimes a motivator for criminals to moderate their violent inclinations. Marcia.
A few months ago, it wasn't that long ago, there was a gang of people who were trying to kidnap and murder the governor of Michigan, and they got stopped in their tracks. So it's on our soil too now, it's everywhere. And I can't even imagine the amount of security that any public official in this country is now having to endure and provide for themselves. Or have provided.
It was just 2 days ago, a British member of parliament was, he was greeting his constituents and everybody lined up. And then one guy came to the front of the line and stabbed him and killed him.
In a church.
In a church, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, Riva and then Ray.
Yeah, I'm going back to page 45, following the sentences we spoke about briefly, these visitors.
I was hoping that I distracted Minya enough to get us off of that. Yes, Riva.
That paragraph concludes with, at the point the two visitors pull Lot into the house and the people standing outside are struck with a blinding light. So this is an example where at the granular level, God is intervening.
Right.
Which might suggest that when bad things are happening to good people, God intervenes. But we know that's not how it works.
Right. Right. And yeah, don't count on that to happen, right? And we know that that we hope that religion can explain some of things going on in the world, or at least help us to think about it in a more meaningful way. But we don't expect religion to be able to save us in cases of, when you're being fed to the lions are hungry, and that's the reality. There's a certain law of the jungle out there. And evil people tend to be in front of that curve. Yes, back to you, Riva. Did you want to continue? Ray.
There's another evil. My father had terrible hay fever. His great-grandchildren, grandchildren, his children, a lot of them have serious asthma, and you can die from asthma. I know when I was working at Searle, a vice president's son in the upper level called out for medicine or some help. By the time they got upstairs, this asthmatic boy was dead. Things like that happen, and that's inherited. And in all these instances, who's to say that the people involved have been perfect? None of us are perfect. We all do things that we shouldn't. We all have regrets.
Thank you, Ray. Let's just look at this situation for a second. So you've got Lot. He is running an Airbnb that two men make a reservation for the night. He picks them up at the town square in his Uber and brings them to the house and serves them a lobster dinner. And during the dinner, a gang starts banging on the door, surrender your two guests so we can gang rape them. Lot's response is to say, take my daughters instead.
Right.
Now, I don't think anyone here is going to think that that's a reasonable thing to respond, but what would you do if you're in that situation? There's 20 or 30 people with semi-automatic machine guns and clubs and bats standing on your sidewalk and banging on your garage and your front door. And they said, give up your guests. What are you gonna do? Some responses, Miriam, Marcia, and Lorraine.
Why doesn't exactly have to do with this, but aren't we made in God's image, supposedly? That's the basis. We're made in God's image. Why the evil?
Well, these 20 or 30 or 40 people outside there were all part of a Los Angeles gang.
Yeah, but
moved
why?
to Phoenix
Why?
because property values were cheaper.
But why did this happen if they were made in God's image? Why did?
Well, they're gang members. That's what they do. They do vicious things. It's part of their culture, I guess. I don't know.
We can't
Marcia.
answer it. We
Yeah.
can't answer these
But
things.
Miriam, they were made in God's image physically, but that doesn't mean that they were, their mores were
Well,
God's.
it doesn't say.
Well, they just putting on trial the last of the Nazis in Germany. They just had a guard, 100-year-old guard at a smaller concentration camp, and they asked him to make a statement. So you figure at that point, why don't you just, make a statement and tell people what you know, and it's a contribution to history and to whatever. No, the guy, he puts a book in front of they let him put paper in front of his face so you can't see his face, and he refuses to make any statement. Now, just a few weeks later, they have a secretary. She was a secretary in a concentration camp for like 2 years, I think. There's testimony that from her office, she could hear the people screaming. And she also is like, I have nothing to say, and also covering her face. So there's just plenty of people who, if given the opportunity, will participate in evil. It's just, I can't explain it. So my question is, what are you gonna do if you're the Airbnb host or hostess, Marcia?
Well, that's what I started to say before I answered Miriam. God, it specifically says to be kind to strangers at some point in the Torah, that thou shalt welcome them and treat them as if they were your own. It doesn't say stop your daughter from being raped, So maybe Lot his balances are off on what he's trying to protect and do, he's trying to be kind to the stranger, to be,
Well, but by offering his daughters, if this is really a plan, I would say that that's obscene. It's you can't do that. Your primary obligation is to protect your children, not to protect strangers, or almost strangers. It just doesn't seem a reasonable response at all. Lorraine.
Yes, here I am. Hello. If you would all look at page 50, I think this answers so many of our questions and perplexities. And I'm looking at must good people suffer because of the bad things others do, the top of page 50 on the right-hand side. And if you read this carefully, I was reading this and I said, God, this answers some of Minya's questions about how could God have allowed the Holocaust to happen? Same question my husband asks all the time, having had my parents live through this nightmare. It says God cannot be blamed for our failings. We are responsible for them. I don't know if I buy that. I don't know if I buy that, but it says God is like a parent. This is in the next to the last paragraph on 50.
Yeah.
Who says to his children, go out into the world and make your own decision. But remember that what you do will not only affect you, but others as well. When the decisions are good and others benefit, the parent is happy, and so is God. When the decisions are bad, that brings pain and sorrow to innocent people, and the parents weep, and perhaps so does God. I never had heard it said that way, that God is weeping. And then in the box on the very bottom, he does mention Eugene Borowitz about Hitler. And it says, some people halfway through the box even chose to be Nazis and engender a Holocaust. They were not compelled by God to do so. They did it freely. They faced their moral responsibility and rejected it, abusing human freedom worse than anything else we know in human history. I don't think we will ever understand how the Holocaust was continuing and allowed to continue. And in my heart of hearts, when COVID came and was killing good after good and little children and someone like Colin Powell, who died yesterday or the day before, who went to my alma mater college, someone who was so good to the Jewish people, and something like COVID gets him. I wonder what the messages we're supposed to take away from the nightmare of COVID. At first, I thought it was God punishing us because we're greedy. We've gotten too caught up in, I want this, I want that, never saying no to our kids. But there's more to it than that. There's something really wrong. And I don't think it's wonderful to discuss it and to read about it, but I don't think we're ever going to understand why these things happen.
But the point that from what you read there is that God raises us up, and then we're responsible from that point on. So what happens in the world is not determined by God, but rather by us. So if we do bad things, we do bad things, and God does not send that ray of light that Reva read about to stop the gang from breaking down the door, that if people do that, that they do that. And so we're essentially on our own in this world, that God is there as an inspiration, as a quote unquote parent, somebody who can guide us and give us ideas, and we can go talk to God once in a while if we want to. But when we're out on the street, you better know how to use a knife. You know, that's what I'm reading from what you just read. That's it. So that puts us back in the situation that there's going to be bad people, and there's going to be many others who just follow along. Like this secretary on trial, you know, if she did talk and the guard in the concentration camp, they'd both probably say the same thing. We were young, we were 18 years old. Their Nazis were in power. You know, there was no internet. Nobody told us anything different. So of course we joined. We got a job for the Nazis. We were Nazis. We followed them. What they said sounded good. We didn't know any better. We didn't think about these things. And they were telling us all this stuff, and there was a lot of, excitement and, marches, and we were going to make Germany this great country. And everybody was blaming the Jews for everything. And so we felt that was probably right. So the same could be, you see today how easy it is to convince a lot of people of things that make very little sense. And we're saying, how do people believe this? And you try to talk to them, and it's like talking to a wall. And you realize they have no critical thinking skills. But if you're raised in a society like that, whether it's communist or fascist, where there's one, and even it doesn't have to be communist or fascist, it could be capitalist too, where you're raised with, with certain things that you're told are right, and you're not encouraged to learn how to think, which is not really that hard, but it's a skill. Then you just follow along, and you agree with what people are telling you. Benita.
I'm not sure if I'm saying this right, but Judaism, I'm not sure about other religions except for Christianity, but Judaism is the only one that you are responsible for your own actions. And by doing really, really good, that doesn't mean you're going to go up high into heaven or down into hell. But Christianity, the PR here about sacrifice and that they could do what they want. I mean, I'm not saying everybody, but these very religious people can do what they want because they've been saved. It's a concept that Judaism just doesn't have.
Correct.
And something like this, where God says, and that's how I've always believed, is that you are responsible for your own actions. And you need to be good because it's the right thing to do. And there's people out there, you're right, who just don't think that way. And the religious ones think that whatever they do is fine because they've been saved. So it's a concept I don't understand at all, that concept. So
Correct. And I don't understand it either, but it's something that I guess what today's topic is how do you deal with it? Because you've got these people out there who either don't think or they think evil. And then unfortunately, they can either directly or indirectly hurt you. So in this case, a gang comes to your house and demands your Airbnb guests. Turn them over so we can gang rape them and maybe murder them. And in another case, you're driving along and some drunk driver smashes into you and kills you. So this is not an evil person, but clearly there's a certain lack of logical thought, like I'm going to a party, I'm going to be driving a car. Either I don't drink barely, or if I want to drink, I leave my car there and take Uber home. And this person doesn't make that set of calculations. So I can drink as much as I want and I can drive and I won't have a problem until they have a problem and they smash into you and you die or you get crippled because of their, is that evil? Is that lack of consideration? It seems to call it a lack of consideration severely understates this. This is not like dropping a piece of an empty beer can on the grass, lack of consideration. This is turning you into quadriplegic because they couldn't get an Uber. Okay, who's next? Riva.
Yeah, I can't resist quoting Golda since she's part of our book club this afternoon. And during a period of war in Israel where she was really the leader, she said, if I felt it was the right thing to do, I was for it, regardless of the possible outcomes. And I think one of the gifts of our ancestors is to help us refine our sense of what is right. You know, and there are sometimes Sophie's choices, bad choices, like do I allow one child to die rather than another child dying? I think, you know, I think it's important that we study what is right and refine it and teach it to our children. And so that sometimes there are terrible decisions to be made, you know, a bad decision or a worse decision. And we just do the very best we can.
Yeah, so now Dee, your son is in the Caribbean, correct?
Yes.
And has he seen any of this sort of thing that you can talk about where there's certain people that are either consciously or unconsciously doing things that can cause harm to others, and there's no way to really deal with that?
Yes, with COVID, you can't go to the island as a student in medical school without the vaccinations, both. And then you go quarantine. Well, all the natives, the Grenadians, they refuse to take the vaccine. So therefore, 100 students who had the vaccine got COVID and had to be sent home. So they had to shut down the medical school, and many of the students have left because and then there was a curfew set where if you weren't in by a certain hour, and a very early hour, there was a $5,000 fine. So yeah, and he's very upset because many students have left. I just talked to him actually. He said he's thinking about leaving because they went back to doing virtual, which is more complicated than medical school itself. But the students were so depressed over this quarantining and then the lockdown. They were in lockdown for 2 weeks. They couldn't even go out in the rains because the natives refuse by choice to get the vaccine. They have it there.
But is it by choice if you're, in other words, at what point do you, blame somebody as doing a conscious malicious act as opposed to being misled or being, in other words, to what degree do we, the gang that's trying to break down Lot's door, they seem to be pretty aggressive and doing something pretty active, but at what point do you attribute maliciousness to what people do, and how much can you excuse, going back to the Nazi analogy, the earlier Nazis on trial gave the excuse, right? I was just following orders, right? And in a military environment, there is some, if you don't follow orders, they take you right out during wartime and shoot you, right? So you better follow orders. So, but when we hear that, we go, there's no possible way you can justify that. And in Dee's case, if people don't have education, they don't know, can you blame them? And at what point, is that different from the Lot situation where these people are trying to smash down his door? Lorraine, Bonnie, Jennifer, Shirley, or Bernie? Sigh.
It's always interesting to think that in any kind of a war, every country involved in the war feels that God is on their side. He's always on their side. Regardless of what they're fighting for, God is on their side. He gets chopped up pretty good.
Well, I think what Lorraine read a few minutes ago would say that God is not on anybody's side. God is sort of a mentor who's available to those who want to take advantage of it, but God doesn't directly get involved in the skirmishes themselves. Marcia.
Oh, for goodness sake, and every time somebody wins a ball game, oh, thank God. God, thank you for helping us win this ball game. God is not worried about whether, who wins the World Series or the whatever honor, NBA championship or whatever it is. But we always turn to God for blame and for thanking, depending on which way things are going, So, and that's true, like Sai says, war-wise and things of that sort. So it's just a natural thing, I think, for people to do that.
Bonnie Longmire, comment?
Yes.
I'm sure you have strongly held positions on these questions.
I do, but there are some things I want to look up just to, because sometimes I think out of the box. Yeah, I don't know if you're familiar with that expression. But,
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
okay. But I think out of the box, and sometimes I have found that I'd like to look some things up before I open my mouth so that I can project myself much better than just being spontaneous. But I do want to say one thing. The secretary that you were referring to and the SS officer, I don't know if you remember this, but you and I were talking maybe 3-4 weeks ago, and I was telling you about a documentary I had just watched called The Final Count. And the director, Luke Holland, his grandparents, I believe, were Holocaust survivors. But he did interview, because he went to Germany, he did interview a female. She was a bookkeeper, and she worked at a labor camp where she could look out her window and see all of the Jewish prisoners being taken into an area. And the thing was, they count them, and the same amount that went into the area had to come out. But sometimes they were dead, it was their dead body that came out. And she talked about that. And I'm just curious if she is the person that you're talking about that they just arrested.
I don't know. I guess partly I'm so upset by these sorts of things that I try not to read them. So in this case, I saw the headlines, I couldn't help it, but I deliberately just wanted not to read about it because it's just so upsetting. So I don't know if it's the same person. I would think not. I think there are thousands, tens of thousands of people like that in that situation, or hundreds of thousands, and very few were ever punished.
It's possible. It's possible. I also just want to make one quick comment. I do believe that people, human beings that really embrace God, not as this punishable God, but as a loving and compassionate God, they are the ones that step up and do things. Going back to the Holocaust, there were people that were underground resistance fighters. There were people that risked their own lives to bring Jewish families and hide them. But all we hear about is, we don't hear enough about those people. And I do believe that those people were in touch with a loving God. And no, God didn't do it, but because they embraced God's goodness, they did the right thing.
All right, let me retell. The way that I told the story was that Lot got an Airbnb and he's got 2 overnight guests. But let's say I change that story and say that Lot is trying to protect 2 men who are being hunted, and he's trying to hide them. Let's change that story to fit more Bonnie's suggestion, and then these people uncover that he's hiding these people, and they demand that they be given up, more like a Nazi kind of situation. Then it's equally or even more tragic and upsetting.
The men, are they the men that Lot is keeping hidden? Are they not, using the theory, are they Nazis or are they good people?
Well, the 2 people, according to the story, are just there's no suggestion that they're criminals at all.
Okay.
And the rabbinic commentary suggests that they're actually angels, but we won't, there's several cases where stories in the Bible where the Bible identifies them just as traveling people, are identified in the rabbinic commentaries, which came, of course, hundreds of years later, as angels. And this is true here. This is true where Abraham has those 3 guests in his tent and serves them a tremendous meal, which of course you would not serve angels food because they don't eat anyway. So offering them a big feast would be kind of a waste of time and effort. You're much better off preparing a big feast for the rabbi who would eat it rather than an angel who won't. But that was a joke. But they're certainly not bad people. They're just travelers, but in case A, they're just travelers. In case B, they're being persecuted for some unjust reason. That's, I changed the story to make it fit, what Bonnie had just said. Okay, Pam, Marcia, and and then maybe Minya. Okay, Pam.
Do you think Abraham is upset that sometimes God micromanages, like, with Isaac, and other times God doesn't come in and micromanage a solution like Sodom and Gomorrah?
Right.
So I think and maybe Lot has the same thing and I think we have that type of attitude now, is sometimes we're disappointed. Our God we expect God to micromanage and come in and save something.
Bless you.
God is looking at a bigger picture.
And and I guess, we've spoken about this, that we have 17 people here or so, and we probably have 17 different theologies, so we all have kind of different ideas about what God is and what God could be and what God should be and what God will do and will not do. So ranging from God doesn't do anything ever to God does everything all the time. So it's going to vary enormously. And I guess, that's why, my first year here, if you remember, 2.5 years ago, we did a lot of courses about God, to just sort of open that discussion up. We had a seminar, America's Four Gods, that you may recall, that met 3 times, that is before COVID, that, we tried to go through 4 basic approaches to God that the sociologists felt that most Americans believe in one of these 4 approaches, and to, clearly state that up front. So depending on which of the 4 gods you had, which were based on 2 questions, then that would determine a lot of our reasonable expectations for God. So you can't say God is just an inspirational voice that is within us, and then at the same time say, but why didn't God rescue those people in the flood, right? Okay, Marcia.
So you don't know that those 2 people who were visiting Lot's B&B were not angels. Who's to say who is the angels amongst us? Who are the ones that are testing us, so to speak, in how we behave and how we act? And not that I believe in angels, got scared today when I saw somebody outside my window. These shadows outside turned out to be the exterminator. Could have been an angel, so. But I mean, you don't know. I think a person is supposed to act in the way that they know is the proper, the way to act civilly, the righteous way to act, and not worry about whether this person is an angel or not, because you should at all times be trying to follow your ideals of what's right, or honesty, or kindness or whatever it is. And so I think that's where we have to draw the line. And these people apparently in I don't know if it was Sodom or Gomorrah, which town, they were not doing that. They were just going off on their own, doing things but did they know that it was right? Was there right and wrong spelled out at that time? We did this last week. We talked about it with Noah too. Was right and wrong delineated at that point, or should people have known anyway?
Well, different societies have different expectations. And if you look on page 49, I'm sure Lorraine will tell you that the rabbinic commentaries, which again come hundreds of years later, condemn the people of Sodom for having very, very strict laws prohibiting, being nice to presumably penniless strangers. So my Airbnb example maybe is not good, because let's assume these people are not criminals, but they have not a penny. So they can't pay for anything. So they're looking for free food and free accommodation. So according to the Sodomites, this is criminal, and these people should not be accommodated. And that may be part of the, that's another way to look at this conflict. Miriam.
I always thought that most people are good, but the evil ones stand out.
Yes, well, of course, right? So all it takes is one Hitler to make a terrible trauma for all of humanity that goes on for hundreds of years. But the average good person who helps you out, you remember that for 5 or 10 minutes, and then it fades in your memory, right? So sure, doing very bad things is probably the easiest way to go down in history, right? And that's what all these school shooters, if you're a 15-year-old boy and you want to be famous, you could do research and find a new drug to help cure MS, but that could take 40 years and maybe you'll never do it. Or you can take a gun and shoot a bunch of people in your school, and in 10 minutes, you'll be famous forever. B.
But that's really, yeah.
On another similar topic, it has to be, God has to care about us, because how could we care about God after all the things he didn't do for us? Look back, our bloody history has been incredibly horrible. The only way I could justify or think that the Holocaust had any good in it, please forgive me for that word, is that it taught us to defend ourselves. We hadn't been defending ourselves. But how can we justify loving a God that hasn't shown love to us?
And the reason that Judaism or Jews developed this work with the foreign governments and don't be too confrontational was because of the 3 revolts against Rome in the 1st and 2nd century. So we swung from one extreme to the other, right? But we fought 3 revolts against Rome. We lost 3 times. And as a result, the rabbis said, we have to stop this. We have to get people to just cooperate and negotiate. And that worked pretty well for almost 2,000 years, right? So and then it worked well until it didn't work at all. And then, and now we're back to the way we were 2,000 years ago. So it's, it's hard to be in a vulnerable situation. When you're in a vulnerable situation, you don't have great choices. B, do you wanted to follow up on that?
Well, this happened to me. These thoughts happened to me after my sister died at 31 of ovarian cancer, leaving 3 children. And then as I got older, I sort of made peace with myself over God and thought perhaps we have to do for ourselves, which we're doing right now in Israel. We've never had an army. We never had anything to defend ourselves. And now we are. So I came to peace. I found a way to accept God.
Well, 2,000 years ago, we had an army, right? So,
Yeah.
you know, so.
It didn't work.
Well, we lost against the Romans, I guess. You know, you also have to, there were, I mean, that's a whole subject. The Great Revolt in the year 70, which led to the destruction of the Second Temple and Masada. That's a whole nother subject that we won't talk about right this second. Minya, and then Marcia, and if there's somebody who hasn't spoken so much who'd like to, Bernie or Dee or whoever else would like to say anything.
I'd like to just go back to what was said about God allowing man to make his decisions as to what is right or what is wrong. I recently read in a book that someone used the explanation of God turned his face away during the Holocaust. That's why he didn't see what was going on.
Right.
And in the same book, someone said that Hitler removed people from a humane society, and those people that were so-called bad followed him into this unhumane world, and that the ones that were good were the ones that didn't follow him, and then those became the righteous among us.
But to be good in a society where most people are bad requires a certain upbringing. It requires that you have a certain independent spirit and that you've been able to get a certain education. I think if you're raised from a young age in a fascist or communist society where there's only one acceptable view, then I would, I mean, the reason I'm kind of I wouldn't go along with stuff like that is because of the way I was raised and the independence of thought I had. But if I was raised in one of those societies, I don't think I'd be like that.
But you have to have a certain strength of spirit also, because when you see things like that go on and you make the decision to stand out and fight back, you're making that decision knowing that if you don't do anything, you could be killed anyway. But if you're doing something, at least you know you're going to die doing what you think is right.
Mm-hmm. Miriam, and then
I read an article, or I should say, recently, that I was just horrified. I didn't know that anti-Semitism was as bad as it is. It's still going on. Anti-Semitism always goes on. And I read the article where the people who exterminated the Jews were heroes. I had never heard that before. And I couldn't believe it. They were called heroes, and they're all over this country and all over Europe. People who believe that the people who exterminated the Jews are heroes.
All right, there's all sorts of such ideologies, that, I mean, if you Google, I ran into this website just by Googling something pretty conventional. I think it's called Stormfront, and it's a web message board for neo-Nazis, and it's right up there. I was looking, I think I Googled something innocuous like political divisions in America or something, nothing Nazi related, and it came right up. And it's a message board. Some of the people on there are just kind of, dissatisfied with society, but certainly the more, important members of there message board are outright Nazis. And I looked at it for 5 or 10 minutes, and you know, immediately saw some of the people there are talking about how they'd like to murder all the Jews. You know, it was very plain sight. And then on the that's on the right. On the left, you just had that Irish writer. She's 30 years old. She writes novels. And so she announces her new book. She's not going to let an Israeli publisher translate it into Hebrew.
Yeah, I
So
saw
then
that.
somebody says she's an anti-Semite. And then now we're using the word anti-Semite in a broader context than technically anti-Semite is someone who fundamentally hates Jews or followers of Judaism completely irrationally for no, it's a very specific thing, but we're using it in a broader sense. So in response, she says, no, I'm not an anti-Semite, and I'm not even against translating my book into Hebrew, but it can't be done by an Israeli publisher. Meaning I want to destroy the state of Israel. I don't want there to be a state of Israel. I don't want there to be Israeli publishers. But if some group of Jews who are outside of Israel, if you destroy the whole state of Israel, I don't want to kill every Jew. A group of them can move to Wisconsin and set up a little Hebrew printing press, and I'll let them translate my book into Hebrew if they want to read it in Wisconsin. So is that anti-Semitism? It seems to me pretty hostile. Nobody's saying that we want to dismantle Ireland and not work with Irish presses in Ireland. And if they want to, there's an Irish language that the only Irish people will let use Irish language have to live somewhere else because we want to destroy their whole country. I mean, to me that, so you get it from both sides. And of course, there's hatred toward all sorts of other groups, the veneer of civilization that's keeping us from devouring each other is very, very fragile, as you see. Okay, Steve, over to you.
Just a few, Rabbi, I think you should probably sum up what we've talked about today, and then let us conclude with the blessings, okay?
Okay, well, we had certainly a very free-floating discussion today. We didn't stick to the text barely, which is fine. The story was about Lot and his daughters, and his offering his daughters to be gang raped, as horrible as that sounds, and that God or the angels did intervene and then says, you better leave because I'm destroying Sodom and Gomorrah, these twin cities. Lot's wife isn't so lucky because God says, or the angel says to her, don't
turn back.
Don't turn around and look at what's going to happen. It's not your business, just go. And what does she do? The curiosity killed the cat. She turns around to see what's happening to Sodom and Gomorrah, and she turns into a
pillar of salt.
And this is in the Dead Sea region. So today you have the Dead Sea, where if you go there, you can float because the salt content of the lake is so incredibly high. And so the lesson of this story is we're not sure, but clearly you want to avoid a Sodom situation where everybody seems bad and everybody seems to be trying to hurt innocent people. Okay, Riva, and then Steve.
Just a reminder, I hope you've all received the announcement that we have a class on ethics of the sages, Pirkei Avot, starting November 2nd. If you love discussing ethics or Jewish related thought and issues with others, with this community, I invite you to contact the temple office and register for the course. It's going to be Tuesday mornings at 10 o'clock for 4 Tuesdays, starting the first Tuesday in November.
Very good. Thank you, Reva. Thank you,
You're
Rabbi.
welcome.
Let us conclude with the blessing. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torah emet, v'chayei olam natan. Baruch atah Adonai, Natan Torah.
Natan HaTorah.
Blessed
Blessed
is
Adonai,
Adonai our God,
God,
ruler of the
universe,
universe, who has given us the teaching of truth, implanting within us eternal life. Blessed is Adonai, giver of the Torah. Amen.
Amen.
Have a good rest of the week, everyone, and take care. Be safe.
Thank you for such a wonderful discussion, everyone. And Rabbi, thank you for just bringing this together.
Bye,
See
everyone.
everybody Friday.
What?
What's going on Friday?
Shabbat service.
Oh, the boxer.
Shabbat service.
Ah,
On
Shabbat.
Friday. I'm a greeter, so I always, hello,
We
everybody.
know you. We know you. And your cheering smile.
Oh, thanks, Steve.
You're welcome. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
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 Bye-bye.